Okay, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how I got sober and why I'm still sober today and how I stay sober, even though I don't go to AA or like do any 12-step type of program. Anyway, so when I was in college, I was in a relationship for like 5 years, my junior year of college. That spring, um, I really wanted to like get married and buy a house and that shit. I always was like really controlling and I didn't think that I was at the time, but in hindsight, that's what was happening. I was like very demanding. And these things with my partner weren't happening on the timeline that I thought it should be. And that spring, we looked at a house and I really wanted to get it. He was like, no, this is definitely not the right time. This isn't the right house. Like, there was stuff wrong with it. We would have had to like drill a new well and stuff. And I was always kind of like, whatever, things will work out. If you really want something, you just have to kind of figure it out as you're doing it and not worry too much about all of the different obstacles along the way. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it type of thing. And he was like, no, dude, this is not the right thing. And it was like a cute house, older house. It had some land with it. I really wanted to have horses. And we just weren't on the same page. And we ended up breaking up over this, over us not being aligned in like our timeline and the things that we wanted and how we were going to go about getting them. And it was like, I want to say April when we broke up. So I had like a month left of school before it was done for the year. We broke up. I always had been a pretty heavy drinker in my teens. I was a teenage alcoholic. Alcohol was always my drug of choice. I fucking loved it. And basically from the beginning, I could not control how much I drank. I almost always would black out, do lots of embarrassing stuff. I was always pretty hypersexual. I um, yeah, dude, even in high school, like I would drink to the point of like peeing my pants, like a lot, like kind of a lot, like a pretty embarrassing amount. And I don't know, I always like I was always that girl that had the group of guy friends. I always had like maybe one or two close girlfriends, but for the most part, like the dudes were that was just how I rolled. Hung out with the skater boys, super emo kid. And we all like had pretty difficult home lives and kind of bonded over that. And I love my friends. I didn't have a great family, but my friends were like my family and we all drank like that. I smoked a lot of weed when I wasn't drinking, which is basically every day, and would just drink pretty heavily on the weekends for the most part. I loved partying. I loved that people always talked about our parties and what we were doing. And in hindsight, like the town that I grew up in was a pretty small town and in North Dakota. So I wasn't really doing anything productive with my time. I started working when I was 15, spent most of my money on I had a car, so gas, clothes, alcohol, weed. That's like what I spent my money on. I did not save any of it. I never learned how to be smart with money or anything like that. Um, and most of my time was centered around partying and drinking and being the cool girl with the guys. And um, I've told you guys about this before, but I had some trauma in my childhood. I was like sexually abused by my older brother. And I was like vaguely aware that it seemed like everybody in town knew about it. And there would be times where I'd be like, no, this is in my head. People aren't talking about this anymore. And then it would get brought back up again where it was clear that I was not a normal kid and that people had their judgments about me and about my family. And my brother got sent away when I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11. He got sent away. He went to like a boys' ranch, then he went to like kids' prison. And I think in hindsight, a lot of my drinking was not only like escaping that identity of being other than, but it also helped me to develop a friend group that I felt like I could be a part of and that I felt accepted by, despite my upbringing and my family history and everything. And it also, I liked being talked about. And I liked being talked about in a context that wasn't centered around incest and like she's different. And I liked sexually, I liked being desired and I liked that like serious pick me energy. Um, I feel like I felt for a long time like people wouldn't want me because of everything and that attention and affection and being well liked and people talking about me for like whatever next crazy thing I was going to be doing. I liked that reputation a lot more than what my family was known for prior to that. And it was fun. It was fun, and we were always doing crazy stuff. And I really, developed my personality around drinking and partying and everything like that. So I got pretty hard into it when I was 17. I moved out of my mom's house and because we had moved to Wisconsin. This is a whole nother story. This is a whole nother story of like offshoot, but I'm from North Dakota. My mom met a guy when I was in high school. He was from Wisconsin. They fell in love, got married within like 6 months of knowing each other. He lived in Wisconsin. So we moved to Wisconsin the summer of my junior year in high school. So like right before my senior year of high school, I was willing to sacrifice like everything because my mom just seemed so happy. Well, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And it did not pan out very well for me. Me and my mom had a good thing going. She was in her lane, I was in mine. I had a lot of freedom when we lived in North Dakota. When we moved to Wisconsin, shit hit the fan pretty hard. And they really wanted me to bend the knee to this guy. And I was like, I don't know you. Very like, you're not my dad energy. And and I moved out when I was 17. A lot of other crazy shit happened that led to me moving out. I got into like probably the worst depression of my life. And they ended up letting me move out before I was 18 and I moved back to North Dakota. And I worked as a waitress. I didn't have a car. I rode the fucking bus to high school for a long time. And um yeah, and I got rip roaring drunk and high like whenever I felt like it, which was pretty much all the time. And I was very functional. I was still like a great student. I've always been a great student. And I always was able to maintain the functionality piece. And I got pretty hard into alcohol for like a good solid year where I woke up one day and was like, shit, dude, like what am I doing? I remember like looking at myself in the mirror and being like, this is pretty bad. Um, it was pretty bad. And I loved my friends so much and I knew that if I tried to get sober there, it wasn't going to work out because that was just what we did. And I didn't know how to have relationships that didn't center around substance abuse. Either it's like obtaining substances or waiting to get the substances or using or anything like that. Like that's what that's what we did. So I moved back to Wisconsin and I was maybe sober for like 2 weeks before I started forming friendships this and with the same type of people that drank like I did, people that were, had kind of a rocky home life, weird background stories. And it's the type of thing where it's like wherever you go, there you are. And I know a lot of people that have tried to do the like geographical sobriety. Like I'll just move somewhere else and start over, and then the same patterns start to kind of erupt. And that's exactly what I did. And then I kept doing that until I started working at an animal sanctuary, and I was working with we had a veterinarian that would come out to the sanctuary like once every week or couple weeks and check on some of the animals. And I loved working with them. And I was like obsessed with him, but not in like a romantic way, but in like a academic type of way. I was like, wow, he's so smart. Like, I wonder if I could be like him. And I started thinking like maybe I could do more for myself. Like maybe I could be like that. Maybe I could just help animals and I'll have to go back to school. So then I started going back to school. And when I was in college, I started going to school for animal science. And I was pre-vet. And that first semester, I had to take a chemistry course. It was Chem 2, Gen Chem 2, which is kind of a hard course, or it was for a lot of people. And I got an A in that course at the end. I worked really hard and I got an A, and that like fucking lit my ego up. I was like, God, maybe I'm not a dumbass. I think I like somehow convinced myself that I was a bad person or that I wasn't smart or that I wasn't worthy or wasn't able to do things in life. And that really like got the ball rolling with my confidence and like, wow, I actually think like maybe I could do this. So I started going to school and I had this boyfriend that I was with for forever and he was great. And you know, flash forward to my junior year when we broke up. And he always kind of took care of me when I was drunk. I didn't have a lot of consequences. Um, yeah, probably pretty codependent there and stuff. He was really good to me. And when we broke up, I mean, most of my drinking at that point was, I wouldn't say it was rare, but maybe still like once a month. I smoked weed every day, like after school and stuff, for the most part. Overused, like chemically dependent on weed. But when we broke up, I went on a pretty hardcore like drinking bender, a good solid month, even though I was still in school. Like I would say at least 4 or 5 days a week, I was drinking and drinking like pretty much to the point of blackout. And after about a month of that, uh, after school was over, I think it got over on May 10th. And then I had a friend that was getting married. She got married on May 18th, 19th. And I went to her wedding reception, and it was in Stillwater, Minnesota. And I got rip roaring drunk. I brought my two dogs with me because I love bringing my dogs everywhere. And yeah, there were so many signs that day that it was not going to be a good deal. Like, for instance, I lost the keys to my car. I couldn't find them. And then everybody helped me look for them, and they ended up being in the garbage. Weird, which was like a sign. Kept drinking. Didn't call anyone. I ended up being like the last person there at the party. It was at her parents' house, and they started giving me all kinds of stuff. Like they gave me a bunch of house plants, and they gave me like a gallon-sized bag of macaroni and cheese, and they gave me like a whole fucking sheet cake. And it was like getting clear where they were like, okay, we're closing up here. And instead of calling somebody, I decided to drive. It's like 20 minutes to my house, like not that far, but it was in Stillwater and I live in Western Wisconsin, so I would have had to cross the river. I started driving. I get maybe like 5 minutes away from where her parents lived, and I was smoking a cigarette and I was fucking with the radio. And it was a nice day. It was probably like 6 p.m. And I crashed my car. I hit another car head on. There were two people in the car. They were fine, but Um, maybe a little bit of seatbelt rash, but otherwise fine. And the cops came, I got arrested. I was pretty shook for a while, and I just kept telling everybody that I was in shock because they were like asking me questions, and I was like drunk as fuck. And I really did not want it to be clear that I was drunk as fuck because I really did not want to go to jail. And then the cops started like trying to, give me all of the tests of like the ABCs and the breathalyzer and stuff like that, and like walking. And I was like clearly fucking really intoxicated. And then I refused for a long time. And then they were like, well, if you keep refusing, this is, and we prove that you are like, this is gonna be really bad for you. And I was like, fuck, shit, fuck. So then I just did their shit. And then it was really bad. I blew like point 0.19 or something, like something crazy. And yeah, they arrested me, and then I had to call my ex-boyfriend who I still lived with at the time, and for him to come get the dogs, and he did. And he was, I wouldn't say pissed at me, but he was pretty fucking disappointed. And I went to jail. As soon as I knew I was going to jail, I was pretty mean, and I really mouthed off to the cops for like it seemed like a couple hours I was mouthing off to the cop and just like talking shit to him and telling him how bad of a person he is. And because they didn't even read me my rights or anything. I was like, don't you have to do that? Like, which I guess you don't if the person's really intoxicated. I don't know, but I was really like, I know my rights and like very like on some pretty entitled shit. They ended up taking me to the hospital to get a blood test because I guess probably I was red flagging them for like, I'm gonna fight this for everything. Like zero accountability on my part, but also I was extremely drunk. Anyway, they took me there. I stayed there for 2 days, which I did not know this at the time, but the arresting officer, I guess, gets to determine how long you're in jail, if you can just be like a book and release or if you're going to stay there. Well, I was pretty awful to him, so I stayed there for the full 2 days. And then when I got out, my ex-boyfriend picked me up. And um, like when I was in jail, I was like, really sad, really sorry. I had been arrested for alcohol before, mostly minor in consumptions, um, and things like that, but maybe like 4 or 5 times in North Dakota, but never out here. And and that was years prior. Like I had built up this different reputation with myself where it's like, I'm gonna be a doctor. Like I'm like doing better for myself now. I'm so smart. And then when I was in jail, I was like, shit, I cannot be doing this anymore. Like, I cannot be, I'm never going to jail again. I'm never going to jail again. I remember telling one of my cellmates in there that I was never going to jail again. I was like, yeah, I'm never drinking again. Like, I'm getting sober for sure. And she was like, are you sure? Like, do you think you really have a problem? I was like, yeah, I do. Like, look around. Like, we're in jail right now. Like, I'm in jail for drinking. I'm in jail for the choices I made when I was drinking. Like, I'm not doing this again. And she was like, okay. And as soon as I got out, I went to an AA meeting. Actually, it was closed when I got out, but I went the next night. And it was scary as fuck, you guys. I did not want to go, but I was like, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to get sober. I've never done it before. And I think the scariest part about it was like, I am not in control anymore. Like, I can't control how much I'm drinking and I'm like really spitting out and like I can't stop. I can't stop. And that was the scariest fucking part for me. And yeah, I went there. They were super nice to me. I got pretty hardcore into AA for like a solid 3 years. A lot happened with that. I met my ex-husband at AA. That's a whole spin-off of it was a good portion of my life for a few years. I really needed that structure in the beginning. I was one of those people that I did everything. I got a sponsor right away. I did everything that bitch said. Whenever you get a sponsor, these are all suggestions, like things that they're telling. I was like, I'll do whatever. Like, I'll do whatever. Which in hindsight, also that relationship got pretty weird and codependent because I did pretty much whatever she said. And then I got to a point where maybe when I was about a year in, where I kind of would pick and choose her suggestions, and then she didn't really like that. And so I think that was a pretty like serious codependent relationship, but whatever. I mean, in the beginning, I needed somebody that was going to be hardcore with me, and it worked out for me. It was super hard to stay sober in the beginning. So having that like structured program and having like a community of people that were like, yeah, we're all sober was like really important because I didn't have anybody in my life that I knew that was sober. I didn't know anybody. Like I grew up in North Dakota. Like binge drinking is a hobby there, and it's kind of a rite of passage. And like a lot of people do it. I didn't know anybody that was sober. And I remember being like getting in trouble and stuff when I was a teenager with drinking, and my mom saying, Olivia, like we have alcoholism on both sides of our family. And I was just kind of like, okay, like I don't really know what that has to do with me. And anything, I mean, most of the consequences that I had up until that point were not that severe, at least like not to the point where I would consider stopping. It was all kind of just an obstacle to my substance use, but it wasn't like a hard stop. It was one of those things where I just kind of got better at doing a little bit of gymnastics here and there to still be able to like drink and use the way that I was. It wasn't, I hadn't really considered that it was something that I would quit doing forever. And when I first got sober, I was like, felt real sorry for myself. I was like, what do you mean I have to quit doing this forever? Like, how does anybody ever quit doing this forever? It was such a huge part of my life. And a lot of my personality and my whole friend group was really centered around parties and drinking and going out. And I wasn't aware that there was another way to be. And yeah, so I did do AA pretty hardcore for a while. I pretty much replaced my substance use with joining a cult. Which don't get me wrong, like it was great in the beginning. I really needed that structure, but again, like I kind of see some parts of it now that really don't resonate for me anymore. Which I think of it really is like organized religion adjacent in the way that a lot of the language is still framed around like there's something wrong with you, and you need to like do these things to like repent and like make yourself better, and that's fine. Like it's really just it was heavily influenced by the guys that started it that were very like religious and whatever. And I remember finding out that it was like you know you're gonna have to like surrender to a higher power, and I was like, fuck, seriously. Like, that's what it is. That's what's keeping you guys sober, is your gotta get your shit right with God. And I was like, fuck. Because I had had like a spiritual awakening before, but I've never been like a church girl. Not really. I mean, when I was a kid, I did Awana with my friend, but my family was never like church people. So yeah, I did AA pretty hardcore for a few years. I quit doing it I mean, COVID happened and I did online meetings for a while, but then it just kind of got away from me. I moved out to the middle of nowhere, and it was just kind of like me and my husband at the time. And when we were married, I don't want to bring him too much into it, but there was a period of relapse for him, and it led to kind of a period of relapse for me. I didn't drink, but I was smoking weed again. And then I realized after kind of like 9 months of doing that, I was like, I don't, I don't really like being high all the time, but I think that this is kind of pacifying me for decisions that I knew that I needed to make or things that I knew that I wasn't okay with. It was a way to help me be okay with that and kind of put off making some really hard choices in my life that I knew needed to happen, but I wasn't ready to really follow through with at the time. Because things had gotten pretty bad in our relationship, and um, I took some steps to follow through with the divorce and everything. I'm gonna skip over some of this in terms of like the divorce and all of that. I got some pretty severe PTSD from the ending of that marriage. And I realized after that marriage ending that it was like really hard for me to be alone. And a big part of that was like my older brother when I was a kid, like um I was always kind of afraid of him and I always kind of just did whatever he said. And even when I was a teenager, he would threaten my life and stuff. And I think I got kind of used to just being afraid of men in my life. And a lot of my use in my early 20s was um, being okay with the like fear. I lived in a survival state all the time, and I was always kind of looking over my shoulder. And I think um, drinking and using helped to numb that. I had a variety of issues. But that was like one of the main things that was really tough. But even after I got divorced, like I didn't start drinking again. And I wasn't really smoking weed either because like as soon as like I was separated from my husband, I felt so much relief. I didn't feel like I needed to keep doing that. Um, but I did get on the dating apps. And I really started engaging with like this addiction to attention again. Male attention and validation was has always been really intoxicating to me. And I started to see different patterns in how I would engage in relationships with men and how I was kind of using other people as like kind of in place of a substance because it was hard for me to be alone. And so anytime I wasn't with my kids, I would like always schedule time with other people. I didn't really develop myself or like hobbies or like things like that. Like I just didn't want to be alone. And it culminated in I started dating this hot UPS guy, and I have that story on here too, if you're interested in that. But basically, when that relationship ended, whatever that was, I started acting crazy, crazy. And it was another one of those reckonings where I was like, holy shit, I can't stop. Like I'm seeing myself doing this and saying these things and engaging in these behaviors, but I almost was like couldn't stop. Like I felt like I was not in control of myself and I was so like emotionally reactive and like not able to be with my emotions and not able to not act on them. And I was like, this is totally fucked. Like I don't like being like this. And so it kind of prompted another major spiritual awakening for me where I was like, okay, so I've had my abstinence from substances. I'm like really in control of that. Now I need to really do some work around my interpersonal relationships and got really deep into the like attachment styles and things like that. And it really led me into trauma work and seeing how different patterns in my childhood were continuing to play out. I was still like subconsciously acting in a way that was informed by childhood trauma in my relationships. And I was consciously um, choosing that, like, I don't want to act this way anymore, and I'm really going to have to break these habits. And boy, oh my God, I really feel like um, breaking those habits, like breaking a habit of something that you're not like purchasing and consuming, but it's something that exists in your mind is like fucking next level shit, man. Like it's real hard. But it can be done. And in terms of my story, it was very necessary for me to like, I think it's very necessary for me to keep um evolving spiritually for me to be able to stay sober, for me to be able to continually look at myself and my life and my patterns and how I'm engaging with life and what I'm trying to create in life and looking at intentionality and who I want to be and what and places where I'm still acting out of subconscious programming and conditioning, like cultural conditioning, um, and just like how I was socialized and stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about how I stay sober now. So I mentioned in the beginning that I don't go to AA anymore. I don't participate in 12-step programs. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It definitely has a place in my story. It was really necessary for me in the beginning to be around people that are sober and to see examples of people being sober in life. And I think it's one way of doing it. I think there's a lot of different ways of doing a lot of different things. But for me, it's not something that feels aligned anymore. Um, you know, my ex-husband is in the sober community, his mom's boyfriend, like they're all, and after the split up, it just didn't feel like a safe space for me to be anymore. So I started looking at other spiritual programs. And for me now, that's like the main part of my sobriety is my spiritual evolution, my spiritual program. I'm really into like Reiki, chakra healing, like fourth way. I took a fourth way workshop this summer and it like really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Um, and maintaining my conscious contact with the unknown and the unknowable, and knowing that there is an unseen world, um, and using that evolution to like operate as a better person in this world is one of the mainstays of my development. I also like, I don't hang out with people that drink heavily. That's kind of a non-negotiable for me. I think that your environment really informs how you act and what you deem to be okay and like acceptable. And so I don't hang out with people that drink or use heavily. I don't really go to bars. I don't even do karaoke. Um, every like once in a blue moon, I'll go to a bar and get an NA beverage and then just leave. Like, I don't really fuck with it. Spending time in nature, I think it's really important to be out and in touch with, the truth of how we've evolved. And a lot of that of our history has been being connected to nature, meditation, love doing that, um, and just recognizing the truth. Like I try to see the truth of our existence and everything and separating like myself from my thoughts and my emotions, like seeing things, seeing my thoughts, seeing my emotions, and not like overly identifying with it. I also don't overly identify with any sort of clinical diagnoses. I think you can it can be hard to change if you're like, have this belief that there's something wrong with you. Maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe the only thing that's wrong with you is that you are dead set on figuring out what's wrong with you so you can fix it. I don't know. So I don't get too hard into that. Um, and hobbies. I try to like just be creative and find other outlets for my energy than just romantic relationships or things like that. I do think, the place that I need to do the most work now is in my relationships with other people, be it friendships, romantic, even like career-wise. Um, that's been like the biggest hurdle for me is like still feeling other than and like having issues with intimacy and getting close to other people. Um, and just I don't know, just be like I'm not regular like other people. Like, I'm not like the most friendly person. I'm not like I consider myself a kind person and I'm nice, but I'm not like overly always trying to connect with people. Like I've always connected with animals better. I work as a vet tech, so I certainly work with a lot of people and I have kind of a customer service persona, but when it comes to like actually like authentic, intimate connections and relationships with people, that's something that I still struggle with. Um, so yeah, so I make I make these videos. I have a TikTok. I feel like that's been really healing for me. Just continuing on a healing journey, and I like sharing parts of my story. And I think it does help other people. I gained so much from listening to other people talk about their stories. And like, especially when I was sober in the beginning, I was like, how the fuck does anybody do this? Could this even be possible? And I think if me sharing parts of my life and parts of my journey and how I've dealt with things and how I've healed through things, despite it being like really fucking hard sometimes and having to recommit and recommit, and recommit, despite it being really hard, um, was really helpful to me. So that is the story of how I got sober and a little bit about how I stay sober today. And I'll definitely share more with you in the future. And definitely like leave a comment if you have a question or if there's something that you want me to expand on. I'm like so down for that. Anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you soon.